Hello YouTube, this is Pullin, and I logged on today and discovered that I had 500 subscribers. Where did all of those come from? Well, thank you for subscribing to my videos, and I hope I can continue to make them interesting, when I do find time to make a video. So I figured I should make one now, because I have 500 of you guys watching them. So I'm going to go over a short game that I played in the Great Lakes Open. This was a game from almost a year ago. And my opponent was Manis Davidovich. His rating was 2103 at the time, and my rating was 1867. So it's a King's Gambit. He played the King's Gambit against me, and I took on f4, and he played knight to f3. And I played a move here that is a novelty. I didn't invent this move. I rather rescued it from the junk heap. The move is pawn to c6. Which has some abysmal results in my database, but I think I've injected some new ideas into it. I still think it's an inferior move to some other lines against the King's Gambit, but I think it does have its points. So I play c6, and I think that there are two moves for white here that are logical, more so than other moves. He can play d4, and he can play bishop c4. If he plays d4, then I think knight to f6 is the best move, because it counterattacks e4. And if knight to c3, it might be tempting to play bishop to b4 to step up the pressure on e4. But my experience testing this line out on the internet has showed me that bishop b4 gives black some really bad positions. This bishop is needed on the king's side to do other things. So don't play bishop b4 if you play this variation. Instead, just d5 is the move, because black is taken with the knight. And if push, then knight to h5. And I really like this trade-off of the pawn on e5 and the knight on h5. It's very difficult, actually, for white to recover the pawn on f4. Black's going to play moves like g6, bishop h6, knight g7 if necessary, castle kingside. Meanwhile, with this locked pawn center, it's hard for white to open up the position and generate an attack on the black king. So that is knight c3, and if e5, then I suggest that black play knight h5 and try to aim for the same thing, like knight c3 push, and it could transpose. If white captures en passant, capturing en passant is almost always fine for black, because on d6 the bishop guards this pawn on f4. So en passant is almost always comfortable for black in these lines. So bishop c4 is a more active move. Knight to f6 again I think is the right plan. And if white guards the pawn, I think the best move in this position is to play knight to c3. And now, in this position, I don't think that black can play bishop b4. It might turn out very badly for him. I think just d5 is the move that black wants to play. But this line, after pawn takes, I think white achieves the opening of lines in the center that he wants in the King's Gambit. So this, I feel, gives white a pretty good advantage against the c6 variation. So e5, on the other hand, this is no problem, because d5, and captures en passant, as we already saw, is quite comfortable for black. And if white goes into this super trade fest, bishop e6, captures. And now at the end of all this, black is still up a pawn, and he has the bishop pair against white's knight and bishop. And this pawn structure is quite bad, but actually these pawns on f4 and c4, they prevent white from playing these freeing pawn breaks, which in turn help prevent white's pieces from getting out. So this, I feel, is quite playable for black, more than playable. I think black is better there. So my opponent did not play either of those. He was confused by pawn to c6. So rather I got lucky, playing this line that he had never seen before, and I got him to misreact with pawn to e5. And then after pawn to d5, I mean, I'm achieving the closed center game that I want. He played pawn to d4, and in this position I want to bring my knight to h5, but there's no way. So I just play g5 instead, and this looks like a normal King's Gambit type of line, where black plays pawn to g5, only white is committed to this pawn to e5 push, which he doesn't necessarily want. So he played h4, breaking up my pawn chain, and I have to push. And this Algier-style gambit with knight h5 is just unsound, because I can play h6 and make him sacrifice. And then, if he takes, I can just blockade this pawn on e6, and then march my king over to the queen side where it's nice and closed. So he very rightly goes back to g1. And I do not want him playing pawn h4, h5, because that would cut off support for my pawn on g4, so I play h5 myself. He captures, and I play bishop to e7, hoping to provoke a weakness by hitting his h4 pawn. So he plays g3, and then I play queen b6, hitting his b2 pawn and maybe his d4 pawn. So this bishop, it's done its job, so he brings the bishop back to c1. Now, noticing that white's center is a little bit extended, and I have better development than him, I decide to open the game by playing pawn to c5. So he does not play c3 to guard the pawn chain, which would be the usual reaction. Instead, he plays knight to c3. And I wasn't sure at first what he was trying to achieve with this move. I realized I could take here, because this pawn on d5 is untouchable due to queen a4 check, winning the knight. So he went to b5, and he wants to take on d4 now. So I play knight c6 to guard that, and he plays bishop to a g5, a pretty good concept. He wants to remove the dark square defender and then bring that knight to d6. So when that knight comes to d6, my king is going to have to move. And I don't want my king to block my bishop, so I bring the bishop back out. And if he wants to now, he could, take and play knight d6, but he played queen d2 first. So I play a6. I say, okay, do something with that knight. So he says, okay. I capture, and he plays check, and then I come up. And now he's got this impressive-looking knight on d6. But the knight is not doing anything there. Moreover, the support of that knight is very frail. This pawn on e5 is going to die quite soon. So he has to do something to avoid just losing a piece. So he tries to mix things up a bit, comes in with the pawn on c4. I take, now the knight has no defense, so he defends it with the pawn. And I grab the pawn, and he takes, and then I hit his knight, and he comes there. So I think that my opponent was bamboozled by this opening variation he had never seen before. Really, I just got lucky, because I essentially made all this stuff up and, got him to react badly, and all this came, flowing from my opening choice of c6 and d5. So he then, he wants to play rook c1, but I challenge him, and his queen has to guard this knight. So he played b4 to guard the knight, but b4 creates a weakness on c3. I just jump in there right away. And I'm threatening queen takes on b4, and also rook takes, and he can't guard both of those. So he guards the b pawn. And now I capture on g3, and he brings the rook to b3 to guard his third rank laterally. And in this position, just pause the video and see if you can predict what I play in this position. Okay, welcome back. The move here I play is pawn to d3. The reason being I want to cut off the rook from the defense of the king side, and I want this tactic on g1. I'm just threatening rook takes g1 here. And if he plays bishop takes pawn, I can take here for check, and takes knight f3 check, royal fork-its all over. So he cannot take this pawn. He has to do something about the knight on g1 if he guards it with queen f2. I have d2 check, and this is quite embarrassing. His king can't stop my pawn and guard the queen. Like if he plays king e2, I just queen the pawn. So he has to play queen takes here, and then rook takes just wins a piece. In reality, my opponent saw all of this coming, and he resigned after pawn to d3. So yeah, I think I think that's a rather lucky game for me, but I managed to get a good position with my opening that I developed myself, so I felt quite proud of this. So thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing to my videos. I hope that I can keep making them and keep them interesting for you. Well, have a good one.